This is Between the Brackets, a Mediawiki podcast, episode 20, October 30th, 2018. Hello, and welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren. This is the 20th episode, which I think is a nice milestone. I wasn't sure at the beginning whether I could keep it going for this long on a regular schedule, but it's turned out fine. And there's no shortage of future guest interviews, so it could keep going for a while longer. We'll see. Anyway, this episode is the third Between the Brackets Digest episode, or BTB Digest as I like to call it. So we'll be going through 5 more episodes from the archives and giving them the digest treatment, starting with episode number 12. I'll be including one or more clips of each episode that struck me as the most interesting or most relevant. So here we go. The first episode we'll cover is my talk with Stas Malyshev, who works in the search platform team of the Wikimedia Foundation. We talked quite a bit about his job and current projects, but the clip I wanted to include here is actually just talking about PHP. We're very lucky to have with Stas a Mediawiki contributor who's also heavily involved with the PHP project. And PHP, for those who don't know, is the programming language that most of Mediawiki is written in, as are a lot of other applications. Stas had the pretty amazing fortune of having been in Israel, newly graduated and looking for a job in 1999, right when the Israeli company Zend Technologies was being founded to more or less officially take over the development of PHP. He was one of their first employees and has actually stayed with the PHP project even after he left the company, so he knows as much about the inner workings of PHP as just about anyone. I asked Stas about the reputation of PHP nowadays. Does it ever bother you, the sort of, I don't know how to put it, the lack of coolness, I guess, of PHP compared to languages like Python and Ruby that always get a lot of attention?
Yeah, I know. Not much. Like, it's kind of, let's say, a bit upsetting that people kind of regard PHP with disdain before being informed. Like, I know all the words and problems of PHP, and I know that some of the criticism is well earned, but some of it isn't, and I wish people educated themselves a bit more before basically acting on stereotype.
Yeah.
I don't think it hurts PHP too much, because people that are really in the trenches, kind of, they know more and kind of more educated about it.
Yeah, sure.
But I would wish like the more academic people would give themselves time to really kind of educate themselves more before they dismiss the whole thing, which I feel is not for all of them, and not far from it, but for some of them it's the case that they just dismiss anything about PHP before they even know what's happening, or they acting on information that was true like 10 years ago and not true anymore.
Right.
And that's a pity. Like, nobody can know anything, but if you have an opinion about something, then it's better that your opinion is based on facts that are relevant now and not on myths that maybe were half true 10 years ago. So that's my position on it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things to criticize PHP for, as I'm sure is the case with many languages. But I'm very happy when people criticize it on factual grounds.
Oh, right.
But on the grounds that are half mythical, half opinion, and half just not true, I wish people didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for what it's worth, it doesn't seem to have impacted PHP's popularity. I mean, you wouldn't really know it if just reading tech publications and stuff, but PHP is still extremely popular.
Yeah. And that's I think that's great that a project that is so kind of old, maybe established is a better way to say, is still being developed and still is popular and still active. There is kind of unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, in tech industry, there is kind of this thing that new is always better, no matter what. If there is a new framework, that means it's better than the old framework, no matter what. So from that purpose, from that point of view, I think PHP being able to hold up despite not being new anymore for a while is a great thing.
For the next episode, I talked to Remco de Boer, who is a longtime partner at the Dutch consulting company ArchiExcel. ArchiExcel does enterprise architecture consulting using Mediawiki, but in the clip I selected, he's not talking about ArchiExcel, but rather a subsidiary company of theirs called Excel and Knowledge, also pronounced Excellent Knowledge. It's a play on words. Excel and Knowledge does knowledge management consulting, again using Mediawiki. It ties into what is a favorite topic of mine, which is the upselling of Mediawiki for uses beyond what it was originally brought in for, once people realize the power it has. Anyway, here's Remco talking about Excel and Knowledge.
One of the strengths of ArchiExcel as a consultancy is that it is completely dedicated and completely focused on enterprise and information architecture. But as we were working with Mediawiki in our day-to-day practice, we encountered situations where potential clients or existing clients asked us to apply the types of things we were doing with architecture knowledge, but not to architecture knowledge, but to a slightly different domain.
Right.
And that led us to believe that it would make sense to, at least at the front end, to have a distinction between the things we do in enterprise and information architecture and the things we do in knowledge management. So that led to Excellent Knowledge as a knowledge management consulting subsidiary of ArchiExcel. And that doesn't mean that everything that we do is either Excellent Knowledge or ArchiExcel, because a lot of the things we do are still at the boundary of architecture knowledge management. So that has knowledge management aspects and architecture aspects. But some of the things we do are not architecture anymore.
Right.
For example, the things we do in information security, they are of course related to things that you encounter in architecture practice, but they're not architecture per se. And we wanted to have a logical place to also do these types of research and development, these types of engagements. So that led to Excellent Knowledge. It's mainly a label that we use to distinguish between the let's say hardcore architecture and the things that cannot be called architecture, but are still, in our opinion, interesting because we like the knowledge management aspect of that.
Yeah. And is that one, Excellent Knowledge, is that purely Mediawiki based?
At the current moment it is, but we are also looking into other types of applications. One of the upcoming things is linked data, for example, and we're not sure yet whether, I mean, you can do a lot of linked data stuff with Mediawiki, but perhaps there are certain types of applications that call for other tools than Mediawiki. So we are not a priori bound to using Mediawiki. In practice, we're still, for everything that we do from a knowledge management perspective, Mediawiki and especially semantic Mediawiki still suffices.
Next, I talked to Dustin Phillips, who is co-executive director of ICANNWiki, the organization that runs the website also called ICANNWiki. ICANNWiki is the semi-official wiki of ICANN, which is the international organization that handles the Internet's domain system. That's spelled ICANN. Here he explains the kind of information that ICANNWiki holds and why they thought they needed a wiki in the first place.
On ICANNWiki, we provide an encyclopedic, collaboratively developed resource for the people that are either actively involved or trying to get involved in ICANN. And because ICANN is such an esoteric organization and process, we think it's important to have the information as accessible and transparent as possible. So we have content on the processes but through which the policy is made, both on a general level, kind of describing it overall, as well as the specifics of the processes that are ongoing or have completed. But we also have information on the people and the organizations and the bodies that are part of this process, because it's impossible to understand the process without understanding who's involved and what role they play. And aside from that, we'll also just have content on the more technical, generic terms. Like if you're involved in the domain name policy discussion and somebody brings up who is, that is probably a foreign term for a lot of people. So just being able to describe that who is this database of domain name registrant data that, at least prior to the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, was globally accessible. But without going in too much into that, like that's an example of the kind of terminology that we'll provide a quick reference for, because it's so, who is not an acronym, but there are so many acronyms in this space and in this field, like there are in many technical fields, that even just being able to quickly type in an acronym and make a quick reference to understand what it is when it's expanded, it is extremely helpful.
We also talked about Mediawiki, the software itself. And in this next clip, Dustin talks about the benefits of two extensions specifically, Visual Editor and Page Forms.
When it comes to the Visual Editor and additionally Page Forms, I think they're valuable because there are a lot of subject matter experts in the field that are willing to contribute their knowledge to a public resource. Not all of those people know or care to know how wiki markup works. And in a lot of cases, that will be the barrier that prevents them from contributing to ICANNWiki. So for that reason, we use the Visual Editor and Page Forms for specific types of pages, such as the pages that we have on people, to generate pages that people feel good about without having to understand the kind of markup that would be necessary if you were only using the source editor.
For the next episode, I had a more personal connection to the subject matter than in most cases. This summer, I served as a mentor for 2 different projects for the Google Summer of Code, which is a program where college students from around the world help improve open source software over the summer, with everything paid for by Google. These 2 projects were done via the Wikimedia Foundation, and as it turns out, of the 12 projects done via the Wikimedia Foundation this summer, my 2 were the only ones that involved modifying Mediawiki code. The rest involved improving apps, bots, and so on. So I thought it made a lot of sense to talk to my 2 students specifically. Both of these students are from India. Their names are Nikhil, Kumar, and Yashdeep, Thorat. And I talked to them a few weeks after the end of the Google Summer of Code. Here's Nikhil talking about his project, which involved improving the drill-down interface of the Cargo Mediawiki extension.
Yeah, my project was on Cargo extension. I was improving the special drill-down page, mostly implementing parent. My most relevant part of the project was implementing the parent table part, where like you can join 2 tables, add parent tables. Like if there are 2 tables like books and authors, then you can filter the books table using the authors table part. And the other part was adding the custom tabs for showing the drill-down results in different formats, where you can like add any fields in the result. These were the most relevant part of my project.
Right. For context, could you briefly explain the Cargo extension?
Yeah, Cargo extension is like a lightweight solution for storing your data, which you can use in template or info boxes and stuff. It shows the important part of Cargo is the drill down page. It actually shows the whole content of page, whole content of the table in a page where you can filter and see the content of all the table, and you can manage the table very well.
And here's Yashdeep talking about his project, which involved adding a new spreadsheet-style editing interface to the page forms extension.
Yeah, so I worked on the page forms extension. So the page forms extension is already pretty huge. So a lot of work has already gone into it. So my focus was on creating a special page for it, which would allow users to edit multiple pages at once through a single interface. So it uses templates. The concept of template calls. So templates are an integral part of Mediawiki. They help users who can be beginners to easily create really great pages. So my task was to list all the template calls in a spreadsheet and allow the users to edit them through a single interface.
I also asked them about their overall experience with Google Summer of Code and whether they would recommend it to others. I was relieved to hear that they both had a positive experience overall, and I should note that this conversation happened after they both already got their final evaluations, so they didn't have any special incentive to be nice. Here's part of what Yashdeep had to say.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is interested in contributing to open source or interested in coding in general, working on big projects. Because I think in the end, when your code gets merged and when it gets deployed, I think that is the best, that is the happiest moment. So yeah. I think I would definitely recommend to anyone who's even a little bit interested in this.
And here's Nikhil's answer to that same question.
It was great, and why I recommend to others, you get the experience, working on that complex and big projects and working on a real-time project. Most the biggest part of it is on the real time, millions of users, not millions, but yeah, many users are using it, and you definitely gain much more experience than you would work if you would work on normal projects. So it's great.
Well, I started off this clip show with one Wikimedia Foundation developer, and I'm ending it with another one, Bartosz Dziewoński, also known as Matt Marex, who lives in Poland and has mostly worked in the editing team in his 4 years with the foundation. Bartosz has done a lot of work on the two in-house JavaScript libraries being developed at the WMF, OOJS and OOUI, which are now heavily used within Mediawiki. The development on these libraries started in 2011, and I asked Bartosz about whether if development were to start today, the WMF would still be creating OOJS and OOUI, or whether they would have used instead one of the many popular JavaScript frameworks that have been created since then. Here's his answer, where he gives a pretty compelling defense, if that's the word, for developing these in-house libraries.
It's hard to answer. I haven't really thought about it much. It is possible that we would have done without OOUI if we were starting today. But on the other hand, I feel like it has some features that are not really common in the other frameworks. In particular, we've put quite a bit of an effort towards accessibility of the library, and I feel like that's something that just doesn't work out of the box with many other interface libraries you would use.
Yeah, you're talking about accessibility, things like support for not hearing impaired, visually impaired users, or that kind of thing.
Yes, that would include screen reader support. So that's what you're saying. But also things like keyboard accessibility. Just making sure that you can interact with our widgets the way you would interact with the native widgets created by the operating system. Like being able to, for the simplest example, being able to use arrow keys in a drop-down menu to pick up the items from them and use Enter to confirm this.
Yeah.
But first, yeah.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, especially recently, we've put a lot of effort towards making the design just fit the accessibility guidelines of some when it comes to like the font sizes and colors and contrast and so on.
And that's it for this installment of BTB Digest, the wrap-up series for the busy Mediawiki enthusiast on the go. I'll see you next time when we'll be back to having a new guest.